Hey guys, welcome back. Taking a look at a game that I played today. It went pretty well, and I'm going to talk about this game in the context of a lot of the common mistakes that I've been making as a newer Teamfight Tactics player. If you are in the gold rank or the platinum rank like me, then hopefully you can relate to some of the problems that I've had in these earlier games and these earlier ranks. And hopefully this video can be a good example of a lot of the changes that I've made and how it's allowed me to get a lot better at this stage. There'll be some specific tips as to a champion that I think is being underused, and also just in the early game, middle game, and late game, what has been holding me back, what are some common errors that I seem to make over and over again, and which patterns can I break. And hopefully that'll allow me and others to make our way up out of platinum and keep moving on. Early here, I have one of my favorite units, Lux, and I'm set up pretty good in terms of the components I have to build items for her. And going into first augment, I'm looking for something that's going to be useful with what I already have. So either components or an artifact, and I end up taking artifact. So I'm trying to choose a support item from my first augment, and I end up taking Infinity Force. It seemed like the best item for what I'm trying to do and the other items that I can make early game. What I do here is I form an identity in the early game. A really common mistake that I've been making is trying to form an identity around the end game, what I want my team comp to look like throughout the entire game. And it's been holding me back because I developed this tunnel vision. If you've ever played chess, or if you've ever talked about chess or watched chess, there's this concept called tunnel vision where you start looking for how you're going to win the game, and that starts to distract you from how you're playing the game. And so here, early on, I decided to just make an early identity around Lux as early carry, just kind of a bruising, damage laying sorcerer. And that really comes from Infinity Force with two other items. So I have Jeweled Gauntlet, I have Nashers, and I have Infinity Force on her to make her pretty good in this second stage.
It's us or them.
This is a common board I've been playing, and it's been working for me. The board being Zira and Lux with some kind of frontline tank combination. I find this to be very stable, especially if I can make some items that match Zira and Lux. So we have Carousel here. I see a few different units and components I might want. Swain goes away. Nami was already gone. So I end up taking Cloak. My main thing here is I wanted Cloak. I figure right now I could build Adaptive if that's what I wanted, and that would work for Zira, but typically I would prefer to not just throw Adaptive on Zira. There are better items that can be made for her, and I already have Lux mostly built out, so unless other teams start threatening me here, I don't feel the need to slam now that I've built out Lux. Another mistake that I've made is I haven't done a good job of scouting, especially when I was in gold. I found that to be a much more important part of knowing how to develop faster than my opponents. And a simple thing I've done is actually just really pay attention to the opponents I'm playing early on. Just look for someone who's trying to form a fast identity and like what augments other people are taking. I know that sounds simple, but for a player like me that is currently in Platinum and started about 3 weeks ago, there's so many things to learn early on that it can feel very overwhelming. And so one change I've made is instead of thinking about things like here's 10 combinations, or 10 different teams, 9 different other players. I really just try to look at each board slowly, one at a time, understand which augments I'm going up against, and really look for ones that stand out, whether it's a particular unit. Like an example might be, I see a lot of people push Tristana very early. So right here I'm holding 2 of her, not because I want to use her, I could, but because I know someone else is rolling for her right now, based on what's on their bench and on their board. And I know that's simple, but for a Platinum player, that's an improvement that's going to help you go top 4 a lot more often than if you're just trying to make your best board and not paying attention to what is happening around you. Nothing fancy going on right now. I built Shojins and threw it on Lux so I can move Infinity Force over to Zira just to maximize my damage right now. And here we have my second augment choice. Don't love what I'm being offered, so I take the Crown's Guard. I figure adding to my front line, making, you know, a tank a bit stronger is going to balance out my damage in my back row, so that's what I go for. And here we start to get this to the second set of mistakes, really, as we transition from the early game into the middle game. And a lot of the common mistakes I've made right here in particular is making the very easy mistake to roll too hard when I don't need to. This game is a good example of one where I'm not getting very lucky with my rolls. I don't have a clear path to Lux or Zira being 3-star. I'm getting a little bit closer with Lux, but I gotta make the very important decision soon whether I'm gonna keep my economy and level up and push for some later sorcerer units, or if I'm gonna try to roll here and get the 3-star Lux and rely on her for a lot longer through the middle game. And I think the most common mistake I make is rolling too hard. So now we come up on Carousel again, and I see Zoe right there. And this might just be an area that I'm currently ranked in, but as it relates to champions, strategies, what units are available, what you're going to get in your store, I think Zoe is a great champion to plan around, especially if you're going sorcerer, because throughout late gold into platinum here, I don't see a lot of other players using Zoe. I feel like in the last 25 games I've played, maybe I've seen one other person have Zoe on their board at any point. She's available, and that can make middle game a lot easier when you know you can build a particular 4-cost unit. Another mistake I make is related to tunnel vision. A lot of the times I would sell off everything and be really focused on just a few units. But I'm keeping my options open. I want to maybe use Academy here. I checked Academy, and the items that are available right now are great. But soon I'm going to abandon that. But a common mistake I make is not having an option like that available as a plan B. If all of a sudden my shop is giving me great options towards Academy and I'm able to build those units, that might be a direction I could go. So into the middle game, I think getting too committed to one strategy is again a problem. And that relates to my early game. And so the number one major theme right now is avoiding tunnel vision at this level. I don't want to get too committed to any one direction. I'm also trying to balance that out with having an identity. And so early on in this video and in this game, I talked about how I slammed Lux with items. Forming that identity early on and then either transitioning or connecting that to what I'm doing in the middle game or the end game involves a lot of decision making, and I can't at any point decide, okay, here's exactly what I'm going to do to win the game from here on out. At least not until a much later stage. Now I'm looking at my third augment, and I end up taking what's going to upgrade one of my random one-cost units to 1 tier higher. So right now I have 2 one-cost units on my board, Zera and Lux still. They're both 2-star. And one of the nice things about Sorcerer is that there's a lot of them. To get to 6 Sorcerer is not that hard, and you can replace one of your one-cost units on the way up. That's a common strategy I've been employing. And that relates to a small mistake I make, particularly on Sorcerer, which is waiting too long to replace one of those units. And that also ties in to rolling too hard early on. Very often I find myself with a losing board and a 3-star Zera and a 3-star Lux. There's really no need to have both of them built out. It would have to be a very specific and unusual situation where that's the exact best strategy. Alright, we're on Carousel. My plan with that augment is I know I'm going to get rid of Zera or Lux. Now I'm looking for better Sorcerer units. Nami here is my best option. That builds my Sorcerer team. And tier is something that I can use. I can build adaptive. Really, there's a lot of useful items that I can now throw onto any Sorcerer. What I do is I put adaptive on Nami. Makes the most sense. So I have Infinity Force on Nami, adaptive on Nami. And Zoe is now my main DPS with Shojin's, Jeweled Gauntlet, and Asher's. Paying a bit closer attention to the damage on the right, I can see that while I'm definitely behind that team, and they're going to be a problem, I have to catch up. Zoe is now my best damage. Everything's checking out. Now the anomaly choice. I don't have a lot of gold. If anything really stands out, I should take it. And I end up taking Thorn Skin for Mundo. The reason I did that is because I'm going to need a really good tank. I've built out my damage pretty well, but my front line largely depends on meat. Just throwing units at their front line and hoping that the amount of damage I can put out is fast enough to keep up with my front line collapsing. Building Mundo could change all that at this point in the game. And that reflects another really big mistake that I've made, and that has kept me held down for many games. And that mistake is being too committed to a clean structure for my board right now. Like heading into middle to late game, very often I'll say to myself, oh, I want 6 Sorcerer and 3 to 4 Sentinel. Try to go to 4 Sentinel if I can get to 10 or an extra spot on my board. And that's a big mistake because while that can happen, that's one outcome that can work, it's too tunnel vision. It's saying, here's how I'm going to win when that's not what I've been handed. It's a great framework, but it's a mistake. So right now, one of the changes I've made is I know my win condition is having really strong Sorcerers, having 6 Sorcerer built up in my back line, and then building a strong enough tank or front line to keep up. And with the addition of LeBlanc, who I've now slammed a lot of my best items onto. I'd say Zoe is my best built unit. She's doing my most damage, and now LeBlanc's a close second. I have Black Rose, so that adds to my front line. So that helps right here. LeBlanc's going to put out a lot more damage. And with LeBlanc, I was able to sell 0. So we're seeing Lux is now a consistent 3-star unit, which allows me to put items on Lux and not worry about the wrong 3-star unit being upgraded by the augment and doing less damage. We have 6 Sorcerer. A very common good decision I've made recently is going Form Swapper because Elise is a great frontline unit. And we're looking pretty good. We're at stage 5-3 coming into Carousel here in a second. I've built up my damage really well. The Thieves' Gloves on Lux are a good addition to kind of keep me just above a lot of these teams. Now in Carousel, I'm looking for anything that's going to help. The issue is that I don't get to pick an item that early, so I'm going to have to take something late here. And I end up going with Hextech Gunblade. My logic being, it works well with Sorcerer. It can work well with Sorcerer, and it's going to heal my weaker tanks in front line. So in some way, it's going to help me. There weren't a lot of other good options. Maybe I could have taken Shojins and mixed things around, but I don't have the ability to change my items around right now. I don't have a magnetic remover. This team here gives me a really hard time at this point. So they've got Mel. It's getting down into the late game. And a sign that I have not made one of my biggest mistakes throughout the game is that I still have an economy. I've got 50 gold on the dot right now. Very often when I'm making mistakes and I've overrolled, I'll be at nothing, completely spent, trying to stop the rapid decline of my HP. But here's where things also change. There's no longer the concept of tunnel vision. We're heading into the end game. We're now into getting our last bits of components, maybe one extra item, and then we're in stage 6, and that's going to be most likely where things end, so we have to be as strong as possible soon. The number one thing holding me back right now is Mundo, and so a common mistake I'll make here at the end is still trying to be too clean, thinking, you know, I got a few Zoes on my bench. Should I chase the 3-star Zoe? Would that be the right win condition? And in a way, that's the last remnants of how tunnel vision could affect me and keep me held back as a mistake. That would be too clean. And while I'm closer on her right now, it's still, in terms of closeness to 3-star Zoe versus closeness to the end of the game, I'm thinking the end of the game is a bit closer. So that's a calculation that is fraught with error and that I've made the wrong decision on many times. So I'm hoping to make a few last good decisions here. Give myself a chance to win the game. I've spent all my gold. I'm at level 9. And this is where I very often will make a huge mistake right at the end. It's hard to identify what's going to be best for my team. Right now I'm at level 9. I kind of get to have an extra unit in, because 6 Sorcerers is as good as it's going to get. Maybe I could go up Black Rose, but that's not going to help me that much. So I'm trying to stay flexible. First I had double LeBlanc there. And it would have been nice to bring LeBlanc in general up to 2-star, but I gotta try to win every round. I have 7 HP. So I first switch in Jace for LeBlanc, pull a Warwick, switch out Jace for Warwick. And this does help me. I believe Warwick here is a huge part of the reason that I don't lose. That was as close as possible. Literally every decision I made in the game up to that point is the reason I didn't die there. Lux being a 3-star and Warwick are probably the only two things that kept me from being eliminated right there. Staying flexible, looking for what's going to be the absolute max min right at the end can be the slimmest difference between staying in, having a shot at the win, and being eliminated. And it showed in that last round. Now I see the Mel in my shop. And the question is, Mel or Warwick? I'd like a Victor. But then I realized at the last second, wait, let me lock this, because Mel is going to be better with Archangels than Warwick. So I take out Warwick, put Mel in, throw Archangels on her, and Titan's Resolve. And now we hope to win it here. Many mistakes that I've been making, over-rolling, tunnel vision, being inflexible. Those are the mistakes of a Platinum. So hopefully, I'll keep getting better, and I'll keep winning.